I want to welcome to the program a great friend of the program. You've heard from her on the program before, Jessica Anderson, Sentinel Action Fund. How are you?
Hi, good to be here.
We're very glad to have you on right now. You know, we're less than 30 days from the election, and you're doing a lot of the hard work out there in the field to get people to early vote. And so I'm hoping you've brought us some good news.
There is good news. Flash boilerplate alert. These races are tight.
Yeah.
Nothing is won. We're less than 30 days from Election Day. Pennsylvania is just as close as we all thought it was going to be. It's going to be a nail-biter. Montana, I think, will break towards Republicans probably first. It's most promising. Early vote is already underway in the state. Tim Sheehy, the Senate candidate there, is running a great race. Trump obviously will perform exceptionally well. So I think Montana is +1 in our court. Just don't take anything for granted, right? We still know that Tester's a strong Democratic candidate. There's a lot of time left for him to upset the apple cart. Ohio is getting closer every single day. I feel cautiously optimistic that Bernie Moreno is going to pull out a W. Early voting actually in Ohio starts today. He's on the ground. A bunch of senators are in the state. The response from the grassroots and our ground game verbatims, literally, they get better every single day of people getting excited about Bernie, his message. They know he's the Trump-backed candidate. So Ohio's shifting in our direction for the Senate side. It was always looked good for Trump.
Yeah.
But, a couple of weeks ago, there was a gap between where the president was and where the Senate was. And that's almost all but narrowed, and it is a strong position. And then Pennsylvania, I think all eyes are going to be on the Keystone State yet again. And this is a race that is going to come down to the absentee ballot and early vote turnout. We will win. Republicans will win Election Day. No doubt. We won it last time. The proof here of our strategy and of McCormick's success is going to be on this absentee ballot early vote turnout.
You guys are doing a lot on the ground game side, and I know you've got a ton of data. I know you've got a ton of local examples, but I wonder if you could give us a sense of exactly what you guys are doing out there, hitting the doors and everything else.
So our goal has been to turn out these low propensity voters, and these are voters that have only voted maybe one or two of the last 4 elections. So these voters are not engaged. They're probably not listening to us today, sadly. They're not on X. They don't watch their television ads, like they're rabbit ears or they've cut the cords, right? They're not plugged in at all. And the only way we can actually engage with them is if we show up at their door. And if the people that are at their door are part of their community, they look like them, they talk like them, their kids may go to school, they may have a business together, they're at the soccer field together on the weekends, whatever that community connection is, we wanted to provide that and have a little bit more synergy on the ground for these low propensity voters. So in Pennsylvania, there's actually 1.2 million registered Republicans. So they're already registered. They've done that hard work of registering low propensity voters. And we've been working since the late spring to turn them out through mail, through digital, through text, but then through this door-to-door operation, which is going directly to their door and talking to them about issues, cost of living, fracking, gas, oil, immigration, safety and security. I mean, the whole host of issues, and then walking them through how they can either vote by mail or how they can vote early based on their county. And what's been interesting to me is that most of these voters are in the suburbs or the metro area of Philly and Pittsburgh. They're not like downtown city people. They're really in the suburbs, and they need some hand-holding. They need, where they're supposed to request their ballot, how long does it take to come to them, how do we fill it out? I mean, we're really answering very technical questions, and those things take time, and it takes time to build up trust at the door. And so we actually estimate that we need at least 30 individual touches for these low propensity voters between mail, text, digital, and the door knock, live calls to actually turn them out.
Well, and it can also be confusing for people, particularly low propensity voters who don't do it a lot, because, I just know from my own experience, if I vote on Election Day, it's this elementary school.
That's right.
Down the street. If I want to vote early in person, I got to go to the courthouse.
That's right.
In the county. Totally different locations.
Yep.
So part of voting, especially voting a lot, is like the muscle memory of what you're used to doing.
Yes.
And so you're not only, trying to turn out low propensity voters, you're trying to build in this in their head of like, okay, these are the steps I need to take to make sure I go and bank my vote.
Yeah, and also remember, everything is different from the last time they voted in 22 and 2020 when it was COVID. So actually in all of the Senate battleground states, the laws that govern how voters vote have changed since the last time they voted. I mean, in 2020 in Montana, for instance, everyone was getting a mail-in ballot automatically.
Right.
You didn't even have to request it, whereas this year you had to go in and request it. So the habitualness of voting is completely topsy-turvy in today's environment. And so I think of the program kind of in two buckets: educating voters on how to vote and where to vote. And then you talk to them about who to vote for and why to vote. And you kind of got to do it in phases, which is why we started so early and have been on the ground since the spring, especially in a tough state like Pennsylvania, where it's going to come down to the turnout margins of these low propensity voters and for them ticking the ticket all the way top to bottom. President Trump, all the way down to their House races.
Yeah.
So the Trump campaign is very well organized this time around, led by Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita. We've talked about that extensively on the program, and they've had a lot of experience through a difficult primary. They turned people out in Iowa in the primary. They turned people out in New Hampshire in the primary, and they won hotly contested races. They have a lot of experience on the ground, and they're going to carry that into Election Day. So I wonder if you could talk about how you're just amplifying that work that they're doing.
The best thing that conservatives and Republican operatives have for us going forward right now is the cohesion and the synergy between the official Trump campaign and its apparatus, the super PACs, where we can legally coordinate post this FEC report that came out in the summer, which allows us to coordinate on the data around doors. So we can actually directly work with the McCormick campaign, for instance, on our door knocking presence in the state. That FEC opinion just opened the doors for more data exchanges, and it allows a certain level of specificity when we're moving. So we're not double knocking a door. And so you've got a professionalism that is now brought to the ground game that is really new and innovative. And it's also changed nicely over the summer, because you actually saw the Trump campaign and the RNC recognize that you have to do both. You have to have the official campaign working legally in its box, the RNC and the committees working legally in their box, and then outside groups that fill in the operational gaps. So I can go into the low propensity universe in Pennsylvania, and I know there's no duplication. And I know that the other super PACs that are on the ground with us, the Keystone Renewal, the McCormick super PAC, RSLC, Elon's new team, that we're all sharing data as legally permissible. So we're decreasing that duplication. And look, this is not sexy stuff. These are operational nuts and bolts. We get in the data weeds. I mean, we're looking at numbers now daily because we're getting the returns from the state. But this is how elections are won and lost on the ground. It's about the door knocks and the actual conversion and trust that you have with voters that can't be replicated with a television ad.
And for our listeners, if you're getting door knocks or a text or
answer the door,
call,
please.
Answer the door. And you know what? If you go ahead and you bank your vote, then they don't have to go back and knock on your door again.
When you vote early or you send in your absentee mailer, you immediately drop off of our list. So if we're bothering you or someone else is bugging you, the best way to tell us nicely to, bug off is vote.
Vote.
That's exactly right. And it's funny that you even say it, because a lot of times people will say, well, I can just ignore that text and I can just, put my television on mute and ignore that email. Well, it's really hard to ignore people at the door.
Right.
And so, sometimes it's like, okay, what do I need to do to get you to go away? Well, vote.
Yeah.
Let's get it done. Can you make this commitment right now? Are you going to go tomorrow? And we actually have an app that we just built with our friends over at Numenar. I know you know these guys too. They're just light years ahead of anything in the tech space. We actually built an app with Numenar where you can actually track on your contact list of your friends and your family who's returned their absentee ballot, have they requested it, have they voted early, so you can start bugging your friends and family too.
And you've got websites where people can go in some of these states where they can actually skip the line, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's funny because when we started this, in general, the Republican Party was nervous about embracing absentee early vote. And so in January, one of the first things we did was a series of focus groups about how to talk about absentee ballot early vote. And we found the best message was around convenience. It's more convenient to vote early. You can skip the line. So all of our websites, all of our campaign materials are skip the line, pa.vote, skip the line, mt.vote. So you can literally have a one-stop shop for all of your Senate and presidential resources on voting early. And then the second message that was actually really good was the military. So, you look at the military, they've been voting by mail and absentee for decades. If it's safe for them, it can be safe for us as well.
Yeah, and when we talked to J.D. Vance last week, he emphasized, he's like, look, maybe it's not the system I would have come up with where there's election month instead of election day, but you got to play with the game as it exists, because the other side's playing the game. Okay, so I'm curious, y'all have been out there in the field now for months doing all of this hard work in these states. What are the little nuggets out there of things that have changed based on your work that makes you really hopeful for a good result here in November?
So I brought some sexy stats,
yes,
is what we like to call them.
We did process, and now we're doing stats.
I know. This is a real page turner. I get it, but it's the stuff matters.
This is important.
So let's just nerd out together and embrace it. So the stuff that makes me excited knowing that we're making a difference in a state like Pennsylvania, which is really, really tight, is that the GOP is outperforming 9% better in the net ballot compared to this point in 2020. Mm-hmm. And so 2020, remember, everybody was voting by mail. So this was COVID laws. So at our height, we're outperforming that by 9%, which means we finally got our act together. And so from our efforts, we've actually been able to move 120,000 Republican voters onto the permanent absentee list.
Wow.
Which is huge. So last time we were together, that number was at 40,000.
Wow.
So it is a major muscle movement. And what's even better about these numbers is a third of them are low propensity voters. So they've only voted one of the last 4 elections. So these are our numbers that are almost guaranteed to close the margins. Remember, we only lost by 200,000 votes last time. Mm-hmm. So if these 120,000 are automatically getting their ballot and they just have to return it, that's so much easier to close the gap.
Well, and that's going to pay dividends here cycle after cycle. I mean, in Arizona, the permanent early voter list allowed us to win statewide elections for a generation.
Yes.
Dominating there is huge.
100%. And we used to be really good at this.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
When you look at Arizona, you look at some of the McCain footprint, we were good at this, and that muscle has just atrophied the last decade. But we're bringing it back in Pennsylvania, and we're going to show that this is the way you win elections. I mean, I look at these numbers of where we are today versus where we were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, and then where we are against Democrats. So Republicans in Pennsylvania, we've generated over 350,000 vote by mail requests, which at this same point, this same date in 2022, we were only at 172,000. So we've almost doubled it, which is great. And then in 2020, only 35 GOP voters used vote by mail for every 100 Democrats who did so. Now we're at 42 GOP voters for every 100 Dems. So we're closing that gap where they have already been light years ahead of us. We're closing that gap to be on par, ultimately, which is what our goal is. I also think Democrats, I'm not going to go so far as saying they kind of sat this one out, but they're definitely resting on their laurels. They have not put as much muscle into their machine that you would normally have seen, especially when you think about 2022 with Stacey Abrams. That was everywhere. That same muscle you're not seeing from the Democrat governor of Pennsylvania on their side. And I think that's allowed us to catch up and them to stay on par. And now we have an even ball game. It's why McCormick's tied. It's a statistical tie right now.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think they know what we all know. And if you look at a lot of the polling, that the more people who vote, actually, the better Donald Trump does. And that hasn't always been the way the way things have been in the past for Republicans, but maybe they're just not as excited about turning everyone out to vote now.
And I think they had a major enthusiasm gap with Biden.
Right.
And again with the ABEV program, absentee ballot early vote program, it's a spring program. You can't start absentee ballot generation on October 1st.
Yeah.
You don't have enough time. And you've missed all the deadlines. So in the spring, they were still Biden at the top of the ticket, and they weren't doing the work to invest in their program. Now, I didn't tell anybody that.
Yeah.
We didn't sound the alarm in the spring. It's okay to talk about it now because that's all behind us. But they really, I think, rested on their laurels, expecting that the machine would be there. It wasn't. There wasn't enthusiasm for Biden. By the time Harris got onto the ticket, they had like literally gone through many of the state and local jurisdiction deadlines. And so now they're playing catch up. And that's where we have to kind of stick to our plan, finish it through, keep going deeper on our list, and make sure that we are knocking doors and hitting our deadlines all the way up until Election Day.
Yeah. Jess, if people want to find out more about how they can get involved with Sentinel Action Fund, how they can support your work either financially or in a volunteer basis, hitting these doors towards the end of the race, where do they go? What do they do?
Well, first off, we need the help. So if anyone's thinking about, should I knock a door? Should I send a text? Can I give an hour or two? Please reach out to us, sentinelactionfund.com. We've got a module on there where you can drop us a note and we'll plug you in to our volunteers that are on the ground. Even if you're just like, hey, I have a long weekend, I'd like to deploy to Pittsburgh, we'll put you to work for those 3 days. Everybody needs to help. And if you have an hour or you have 10, there's something that you can do to help with turnout and talking to your friends and family and neighbors and getting your own contact list figured out. Download our app. You can put it right on your phone. You can make sure your mom, that she's requested her absentee, that she's turned it in, that she has a plan. And it sorts by state, which is also really nice. Like my contact list is states, people all across the country. And so it'll sort you by state with the dates that are relevant for your state, which also makes it really easy.
That's huge.
Can I make one recommendation? A little bit of a twofer. Ohio State plays at Penn State this year in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a captive audience. Probably 150, 200,000 people out there tailgating.
Yep.
I think that's a perfect place to knock tents instead of doors.
Yes. I was even suggesting to a mutual friend of ours that they should host a rally, and you can only come in if you have a little button that says, I registered to vote, and I already made my plans to vote. Like, instead of paying cover at the door, have your voter registration at the door.
Hey, dude, the left has been doing stuff like
For
that
years.
forever.
Yeah.
Remember 2 Chainz in downtown Atlanta?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, we need that sort of star power, which we have now, right? We've got Elon Musk, we've got Kid Rock. Like, we're getting there. So I'm feeling hopeful.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for all your hard work out there. Really appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.